Hello, everybody. Welcome back to For the Girls. We're excited for today's episode. We're going to go through some of the regulation changes ahead of testing that starts this weekend, get everyone up to speed with what they need to know, and then we're going to talk about the car launches, give our thoughts on all the different events that happened, and then we'll go through some news. So with that, I'm Chessa.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Tiggy.
So even though for last season we had a massive regulation overhaul, they felt the need to add even some for this season. So we'll just jump into this list. It's kind of long. So first, let's talk about the new regulations as they relate to the cars themselves. So the biggest thing this year is the kind of trying to reduce the porpoising that we saw a lot of last year. So the minimum ride heights have been raised by 15 millimeters, and there will also be new sensors installed all over the cars to measure how much they bounce, like their up and down vertical force. That was something that we had seen initially introduced at the Belgian GP last season. And then kind of going along this, there's going to be a really strict floor test to measure how much the floors are actually flexing under the aerodynamic load when the car is in motion. And hopefully this will drastically reduce the porpoising issue. Maybe it won't even be a topic of discussion this season. We will see.
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Another thing is the car's minimum weight has been dropped by 2 kilograms, which is interesting because cars were really struggling to keep their weight down last year. The roll hoops have been strengthened after Joe's scary wreck at Silverstone last year to prevent the roll hoop from kind of digging into the ground and collapsing if the car flips and slides upside down over an extended period like Joe's car did. There were also some more gearbox changes, so there's generally freezes on gearbox changes, but some more changes are allowed in the event that parts become unavailable, which is interesting. There's also some small changes to the rearview mirrors to increase visibility and some other kind of small tweaks throughout the car. But as Chessa said, really kind of the main event here will be the new porpoising regs and then also changes to the roll hoop. So glad they made some safety adjustments there since that crash was actually just terrifying.
Yeah, that was so scary. So scary. I'm surprised they showed that footage in the Drive to Survive trailer.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, but I guess we know he's okay. It's just, that was such a wild thing to watch. But
yeah, that's such a good point because Daniel Ricciardo actually made a comment. I think it might have been in response to a previous Drive to Survive trailer saying it's inappropriate to be kind of highlighting really severe crashes as drama. I think it might have been in response to them showing Grosjean's burning car, where it's hard because the crashes are part of the excitement of the sport, but I don't think they should be highlighting these super dangerous moments necessarily. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm excited to see these new regulations play out, even though they're more minor. I think it's always good to be iterating, so that's good. So now on to the races themselves. We talked about this a bit last season, but double the number of sprint races this year. We have 6 sprint weekends. We have Azerbaijan, Austria, Belgium, Qatar, USA, and Brazil. Last year, like we said, there were only 3. So that's a big change. And we talked about our thoughts on this one. I think I'm less excited about all these sprints, but they definitely add some fun. We'll talk about some other rules related to the sprint that actually make this a little bit better financially. But anyway, as you might remember, there were a few chaotic times last year where a ton of drivers were taking grid penalties and it was sort of unclear what the actual order would end up being. So the wording of the rule has been clarified to state that if there are multiple drivers with back of the grid or 15 plus place penalties, those drivers will start at the back in the order of their quality position. So that just clears things up. I remember doing all the Tetris in our minds and calculations, that math meme with that woman's face, trying to figure out.
That rule makes very basic sense. Yeah. Back of the grid means everyone goes to the back and then gets put in their quality position. So it's very funny that had to be clarified because it wasn't clear before.
But I think that's where people always get confused. If it seems like it's common sense, then please reiterate it so that people are actually on board. I'm glad that this one's happening. The last rule for the races themselves is that for 2 qualies this year, there's going to be a revised format where the drivers have to use hard tires for Q1, medium tires for Q2, and then you guessed it, softs for Q3. The goal of this is working with Pirelli to kind of be less wasteful in the use of the tires over a race weekend. So that'll be
Love
interesting.
a rule about being less wasteful. Keep
Yeah,
that up.
Also, it just makes it a bit more interesting because instead of being able to always do flying laps on softs, they're going to have to figure out how to do some flying laps on hards just to get out of Q1. So that'll be really interesting because I think also certain cars, it'll make the setups different. I think that could be really cool.
I'm so excited. I think this is a good one. Plus, like, I always love a leveled playing field because then it lets other things shine. That's a good one.
So a few other rules. The budget cap is actually going down by $5 million to $135 million.
On
because
inflation.
Because when they originally made this budget cap plan, they were kind of making it a bit more of a gradual adjustment. So the teams are losing money, which is wild because, as we famously saw, there were some issues of sticking to that budget. So we'll see how this goes. However, one, I think, really good idea is there's extra money for teams if their cars are damaged during sprint races. This has been kind of an ongoing issue with the teams because it's risky to kind of go full send in a sprint if it's going to wreck the rest of your budget for the season if you damage the car. So this kind of prevents teams from creating a race plan of not taking any risks during the sprint due to fears over the repairs being too expensive. So there's still, of course, the issue of teams are still going to fix the damaged cars overnight. So there'll still be a time issue, but at least cost and the impact on budget for the rest of the season will be less of an issue.
Big shout out to the crews who are fixing cars overnight. They do not get enough airtime, and it's amazing, heroic work.
100%. Remember, it was Mercedes last year when they wrecked both cars during quali and managed to entirely fix both cars. Like, they needed new suspensions. It was crazy. And another rule on that front is with the seasons getting longer and more taxing on the teams, the FAA is implementing some rules to reduce the hours worked by the trackside personnel on race weekend. So the curfew is getting a little earlier in some situations. If you're not familiar with this, there are rules about what hours work can actually be occurring in the paddock to prevent kind of a race to the bottom where teams would literally stay there 24 hours fixing the cars overnight. So this is really great, especially after all of our interviews with team engineers and former engineers who discussed really just how brutal the schedule can be on the team personnel.
Yeah, I think it was Bernie Collins who said that we're trending towards something where, you know, you have like 2 people for one job because the hours are just getting so crazy. So I wonder if these rules will prevent something like that from happening, or if there's just too much work to be done that like this isn't even that realistic.